My name is Jack Krasinski, and today we're talking about Scream. Sorry, headphone users, I had to do it for the bit. I've actually talked about Scream before on this channel, but that was a really poorly edited video that I shot on my webcam, so please don't look for it. You're gonna do it anyway, aren't you? Fuck. Scream is one of my favorite movie franchises of all time, and definitely my favorite horror franchise. I honestly don't think there's a bad movie in the bunch. 1, 2, 4, and 5 are all fantastic, and while Scream 3 is very campy, it's still incredibly fun and has one of the series' best villains. Scream 4 is actually the movie that I have the biggest problem with, but not because of what it chose to do, because of what it chose not to do. You heard me, the writer of Scream 4 is a coward for not giving us the setup for what could have possibly been the best sequel trilogy of all time.
I'm looking at you, Kevin.
A trilogy that could have started with this movie had they just had the balls to end it a few minutes earlier. To catch up anybody who hasn't seen Scream 4 recently, spoilers for a movie that's already over 10 years old, Jill, Sidney's cousin, is revealed to be the killer at the end of the movie. Well, Jill and her incel lackey, but that's just because every Scream movie needs to have two killers, except for Scream 3, because Roman doesn't need no bitch-ass partner. Roman gang. But what makes Jill interesting isn't the fact that she's Sidney's family. Again, Roman already did that, Roman gang. What makes her interesting is her motive. See, Jill wants to be a final girl. She wants all the attention that Sidney has gotten over the years simply for surviving. So she creates a scenario in which she can be the last one standing. She even stabs Sidney to fully take her place. One of the movie's best scenes is right after Jill has finished her reign of carnage. She walks around the house injuring herself to make it appear more realistic. But in the end, Jill didn't cut Sidney deep enough, and so she ends up being killed via electric shock to the head. It's fucking brutal. But what if Jill did finish off Sidney? What if she got everything she wanted, and then the next two Scream movies were about her? Let's pretend that this is what happened. Let's surgically insert some balls into the pants of Scream 4's writer and make this the beginning of a trilogy about Jill, the latest and most successful Ghostface killer. We can really have some fun with these next two movies once the premise has been laid out by Scream 4's revised ending. We can revisit familiar settings from a new perspective, the perspective of a killer. For Scream 5, it's about a year later and Jill is now in college. The same college that Sidney went to in order to continue drawing comparisons between her and her cousin in the eyes of the public. This is very important because Jill's final girl lifestyle isn't going how she planned. Most of the people she wanted to show it off to are now dead, the movie about her experience is in development hell, and the only attention she really gets is from a group of murder fanboys who follow every move she makes. Don't get me wrong, she's not remorseful or anything, she's just pissed off that she's not getting what she thinks she deserves. Another annoying bee in Jill's bonnet is Dewey, who has assigned himself as her personal bodyguard mostly out of guilt for not being able to save Sidney at the end of the last movie. Dewey serves multiple purposes. He is both a connection to Woodsboro and a character that we can actually root for. Because Jill is, Ghostface, we can't really care about her, or at least not too much. Dewey, on the other hand, is a character that we can want to see survive, but spoilers, he's not gonna. As always, a new killer pops up, but this time our main character is more confused than anything because she's the last Ghostface. So who's this new guy running around in a mask and with a surprisingly small knife? Have you guys ever noticed that? The knife is so little. I think that's supposed to be a thing, they're making fun of the fact that all the killers have these huge knives and then Ghostface has a knife that's that big, but it does just as much damage. I've now convinced myself that that's actually cool. It was a joke in the script, but now I think it's actually cool. Jill first comes face to face with the new killer when they kill her roommate, Kylie. She has to play the scared victim, but inside she is enraged that someone else has taken up her mantle. But strangely, Jill actually perks up a little bit with the new killer running around. The thrill is back in her life, and the spotlight has never been brighter. Dewey was missing during the first attack, so he is Jill's #1 suspect. She thinks he must have found out the truth about what happened in Woodsboro and is now attacking her and her friends as an act of revenge. After a few more killings cement her beliefs, Jill attacks Dewey, hoping to get him before he unleashes his grand finale. But when she confesses to the murders in Scream 4 while Dewey is bleeding on the ground, his reaction is that of complete, honest shock. Dewey isn't the killer, but Jill, once again, is. She blames the death of Dewey on the new Ghostface and tries her best to come up with a new #1 suspect. At the film's climax, the killer is revealed to be Toby Walker, Charlie's brother, Charlie who was Jill's accomplice in Scream 4, who is also getting revenge. So it turned out that Jill got the motivation right, just not the person. Toby knew what Jill and Charlie were up to all last year, but he decided to keep his mouth shut out of, terror. But once he saw that Jill was living the high life while Charlie was dead, he knew he needed to get revenge. But before Toby can land the final blow on Jill, he is killed by his accomplice, Kylie, who faked her death at the beginning of the movie to cover her tracks. Kylie is a psych student who has an intense fascination with serial killers, so when she learned that she'd be rooming with one of one's victims, she freaked out. But the more she looked into Jill's situation and the more interviews she watched with her, the more she realized that Jill wasn't the victim in this scenario. She was the killer. Studying Jill's behavior for the first few months of college, Kylie became assured of her theory, but also upset. Clearly, Jill had convinced herself that she did everything that she did for a very good reason, to rewrite a cosmic wrong, to rebalance the scales of fairness in her family. But Kylie doesn't think that's what's happening. She thinks Jill is lying to herself. She thinks Jill just likes hurting people. In reality, serial killers are boring, and so is Jill. This right here is kind of the thesis of the entire trilogy, proving that killers aren't any more interesting just because they kill. It's actually a take on a really great Ursula Le Guin quote. The trouble is, we have a bad habit of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual. Only evil is interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. Jill isn't some layered villain with a nuanced reason for her violence. She's just a killer, plain and simple. Jill ends up beating Kylie, but the killer has one more trick up her sleeve. She has sent a video of Jill's confession to Dewey to 10 random students on campus. 10 students who have the power to flip Jill's life completely upside down. And the only way to assure that they don't do that is to kill them, which is exactly what Kylie wants Jill to do. Embrace her savagery, lose all pretense that she is better than the other killers, murder them, and admit that she likes how it feels. And that's exactly what Jill does. She has to kill all 10 of these students. So in the end, Kylie kind of wins. At the end of the movie, Jill has everything that she wants again. She's back in the spotlight, the movie is back on track, all the eyes are on her. But something has changed. She's realized that she'll never be satisfied with this life. She needs the blood. She needs the violence. She needs to be Ghostface. Moving on over to Scream 6, we pick up after Jill has graduated college and she is now living as a minor celebrity in New York City. The movie about her experiences flopped hard, so all she really does now to make money is make speeches at high schools and offices and shit like that. She's like a weird motivational speaker bitch. Predictably, Jill isn't doing well. She's been consistently taking antipsychotics in an effort to prove that she's better than the other killers. She doesn't kill because she likes it, she did it because she had to. Well, at least that's what she tells herself. Her life becomes even more complicated when Gale Weathers starts popping up again. She wants to tell the story of the next generation of Ghostface survivors, but Jill wants nothing to do with it. She's managed to evade her so far, but Gale is on the hunt. And then the killing starts again. Unusually, Jill isn't the target of the killings this time around. Instead, she learns about them when the cops show up at her building in the middle of the night. But when she returns to her room, she finds the bloody knife and the heart of the victim. Jill herself is attacked at her next speaking arrangement, leading to an incredibly bloody aftermath. Then she comes face to face with the killer, but it doesn't go as planned. This Ghostface immediately removes her mask to reveal Angela, Jill's manager. She is very confused as to why Jill is confused, because, after all, Jill is the one who asked her to be her accomplice. She continues saying that this is all Jill's plan. In fact, they've been killing people for months now. Angela is in love with the idea of a female serial killer, so she was obsessed with Jill's life story. Jill, on the other hand, is dumbfounded as she doesn't remember any of this, but she goes along with it to protect her life. Angela's confession manages to convince her that she's been blacking out and running around feeding her bloodlust. She can't turn Angela in without her own secret being revealed, but she also doesn't want to kill her and potentially unleash her dark side. However, that's not her only problem, as Gale Weathers finally managed to corner her and reveals that she actually has a message. A message from Sidney Prescott. According to Gale, Sidney has been in a coma since Scream 4. It was kept a secret in case Charlie's accomplice ever wanted to come back and finish the job. But now, Sidney is awake, and the only person she wants to talk to is Jill. A shocked Jill says that she isn't in a good enough headspace to talk to Sidney right now, but she does take the address of the hospital from Gale in case she changes her mind. Jill chooses to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. She sends Angela to the hospital to kill Sidney, but also goes along to frame Angela for Sidney's murder. But when Angela arrives in the room, she doesn't find Sidney. Instead, she finds a trap meant for Jill, who Gale found out a few months ago was the actual killer in Scream 4. Angela manages to slash her way out, but Jill is arrested outside the hospital because she was the only one who had the room number for Sidney. Also, goes without saying, but Sidney is actually dead. R.I.P. Hi, editing Jack here. Recently rewatched Scream 4. Turns out Charlie's accomplice was meant to be Jill's ex-boyfriend. Putting this here so I don't ruin the surprise. I hope a few of you commented about that before realizing that I also noticed it. Doesn't really matter because it's a lie anyway. We could even have Jill say something like, "Oh, Charlie's accomplice was this guy," and Jill could, and like Gale could be like, "No, we think there was someone else," and that would fix the problem. So if you're a big Scream continuity nerd, I don't know what to tell you, but that's the answer. Okay, bye, Mom. Jill is distraught in an interview with Gale that kind of lays out her entire character. She is a killer that tried to convince herself that she is something more. She even confesses to the killings that Angela told her about in New York City. But as she sits in a holding cell, Jill realizes that she feels at peace for the first time in a long time. She doesn't have to pretend anymore. She can be whoever she wants. No masks. Except, of course, for the Ghostface mask that is currently killing people in the prison. Angela attempts to free Jill, but Jill doesn't want to go because she feels she's going to have to pretend again on the outside. Angela says that if she doesn't come with her, he is going to get mad. Jill is confused. Who's he? Angela says, "The other person you brought on to kill with you." And as she says that, she's stabbed through the heart. Another Ghostface walks up to the bars. He reveals his mask and reveals Stu Macher. Stu has been in hiding for almost 30 years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. He revealed himself to Charlie when he found out that Charlie was the new Ghostface, the new inheritor of his legacy. Charlie told Stu about Jill, and Stu was the person who pushed Toby to snoop into his brother's business. He was surprised and a little bit jealous to see Jill's plan work, but upset that she decided to return to normal life so soon afterward. He wanted her to embrace who she really was. Stu helped Kylie to learn the truth about her roommate and introduced her to Toby. But even that wasn't enough, so he had to go bigger. He convinced Angela that he was working with Jill and had her gaslight her client into thinking that she was blacking out and killing ravenously. Angela actually believed everything she said, but all Stu wanted to do was take the tiger out of the cage. And now that she was out, he wanted to play with her. He wants her to be the Bonnie to his murderous Clyde, the first acolyte in his Mansonian cult of serial killers. He thinks they can bring carnage back to the streets and fear back into people's heart. But of course, all of that would be like a lot better with Matthew Lillard's absolutely unhinged dialogue reading. Jill doesn't know what to do, but she definitely rejects Stu's offer. She doesn't want to be some disciple, especially after she just found herself in completely gruesome fashion. She doesn't want to spend the rest of her life as a cultist of fucking Shaggy. An enraged Stu attempts to kill Jill, but after a fight, she gets the upper hand and finishes him off like that TV should have a few decades ago. She'd also probably deliver some really cool line about how Stu was just a knife directed by Billy Loomis while she stabs him. I don't know, some cool, some dope, fresh. But Jill doesn't get her happily ever after either, because as she's explaining what makes her such a better killer to Stu, Gail shoots her in the chest. She stands over the body of the woman who killed her friend and her husband and says, "You're not the evolution of man. You're not Godsend. You're not a poet with blood. You're boring. And you killed my husband. Fuck off and die, bitch." Again, that will sound a lot better coming out of Courtney Cox than my Polish ass. Scream 6 ends with Gail meeting Patrick Dempsey's Mark from Scream 3. She tells him that Sydney's murder has finally been avenged, and he thanks her for everything that she's done. A teenage girl walks in and hugs her Aunt Gail before heading to her first day of high school. She has dark hair and her mother's name, Sydney. So before we close this out, I just want to cover one thing. This trilogy wouldn't be as, meta as the first one. Scream 4 is already pretty meta, but other than that, you can't really continue it with the killer as your protagonist because that's not really how slashers work. This is around the time that elevated horror would be becoming popular in Hollywood, and this movie would be both participating in and criticizing that. Participating in because it has a thesis about murderers being boring and not inherently more interesting than normal people. But also criticizing it because it's saying there is no deeper meaning and that killers just kill because they're killers. So tell me what you guys think. Do you think that Scream 4 should have ended earlier to allow for this trilogy, or, a trilogy actually written by actual writers instead of some doofus in his room? What do you think? I think it's pretty cool, but I wrote it, so I'm obviously biased. What do you guys think? Comment below. What do you think Scream 5 and 6 should have looked like if Scream 4 ended earlier? Do you think Jill would make a good protagonist? Do you think I'm pretty? Do you think Sydney should actually still be alive? Do you think I'm hot? Yeah, answer all those questions in the comments, please, and thank you. Also, don't forget to subscribe. And I promise, if you subscribe, I will stop talking like this in the future videos. I promise this is just a bit. I don't actually talk like that. Okay, bye.